In medical terms, fasting is the detoxification of the body through the restriction of food. Spiritual fasting entails reducing the intake of food and replacing the activity of eating with the exercise of prayer and a mindfulness towards spiritual concerns. The New Testament word, which is translated fasting, literally means one who has not eaten or one who is empty. There are 3 types of fast generally recognized in the Bible. A normal fast, in which there is no intake of food for a prescribed period of time, though there may be an intake of liquids. There's a partial fast in which the diet is limited, though some food is allowed. And an absolute fast in which there is a total abstinence from food and liquids in all forms. Throughout the Old Testament, fasting is associated with a heartfelt attitude of persistently asking God for aid of some sort. Regular fasts were usually for one day, morning to evening, with food permitted at night, as we see in Judges 20, 1 Samuel 14, 2 Samuel 1. Although there are reports of longer fasts, such as Mordecai's call for a 3-day fast in Esther 4:16, and the 7-day fast at Saul's death found in 1 and 2 Samuel. Among special fasts were Moses' 40-day on Mount Sinai in Exodus 34, and Daniel's 3-week fast prior to receiving visions in chapters 9 and 10 of Daniel. In general, in the Old Testament, fasting was abused. Instead of a sincere act of self-renunciation and submission to God, fasting became externalized as an empty ritual in which a pretense of piety or looking religious was presented as a public image. Hence, the prophets cry out against this kind of callous hypocrisy. Jeremiah records Yahweh as literally saying, "Though they fast, I will not hear their cry." Jesus' understanding of fasting is significant in that it represents a shift in the role of fasting. His initial attitude undoubtedly reflected the fact that he grew up participating in regular fasts and therefore shared in the prevailing teachings of his day. Yet, his mature teaching about fasting breaks with the traditions of the rabbis. 2 accounts relating to Jesus and fasting are very important. His fast is a part of the temptation in the wilderness found in Matthew 4 and Luke 4, and also his teaching about fasting in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6. Specifically in Matthew 6, verses 16 through 18, Jesus is giving instruction on fasting, which coincidentally immediately follows his instruction on praying. In verse 16 it says, "When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." This doesn't mean we don't tell each other we're fasting to support and encourage one another. It means we don't do it for show, to look religious or look like we're acting the right way. Jesus' temptation in fasting was born out of struggle. Immediately after his baptism, he was cast out into the wilderness by the Spirit to face, as the second Adam, the temptation of Satan. In the midst of his temptation, he fasted and prayed and read the verses quoting Deuteronomy 8:3 and Psalm 91:11 and 12. His fasting is demonstrated dependence on God. Jesus' words about fasting in the Sermon on the Mount constitute a radically different approach to voluntary fasting. In condemning the type of fasting which seeks favor by men by a showy display of outward self-righteousness, Jesus taught instead a robust faith that sought genuineness of relation to God through a pure heart. Jesus does not condemn fasting as such, nor does he forbid it. He does, however, give it a new meaning. Fasting is service to God. Fasting is worship to God. This is a new understanding of fasting that is set within the context of the dawning of the time of salvation. The bridegroom is here. It is a time of joy, not sorrow. And consequently, the prevailing mood of fasting as mournful stress and pretended piety is inconsistent with the mood that has begun with Jesus' teaching. His teaching can be summarized: fasting must be done within the context of joyful thanksgiving of the new life found in Christ. The inseparable partner of fasting is prayer. It should conform to the same conditions as prayer, not showy, but a quietness before God arising out of gratitude, expressing thanksgiving grounded in faith as a means of spiritual discipline and ultimately growth. If you want to grow in communion with God, or if you are at a place where you feel like you haven't heard from God in a long time, or you're not hearing from God, if you're struggling with something, there's some sin that has you bound up, maybe fasting is an appropriate response for you. But fasting and spending time with God in prayer is an act of thankful worship. The life of the follower of Jesus Christ is about joyfully submitting to Him, and He calls His disciples to fast and pray. How are you going to fast this season with LifePoint?